A professional speaker, Mike Karsen is a member of the Association of Professional Genealogists, the Genealogical Speakers Guild, and is a past president of the Jewish Genealogical Society of Illinois. He has presented over 300 talks on genealogy topics locally, nationally, and internationally, including at the Newberry Library and the Spertus Institute for Jewish Learning and Leadership in Chicago. Mike is the author of the Jewish Gen website, Guide to Jewish Genealogy in Chicagoland, and he has published many articles on genealogy. Thank you, Mike, for being here tonight, and I will turn it over to you.
Okay, Rebecca, thank you. This is Mike, and I'm glad all of you can attend through the magic of Zoom. And what I'm going to do, and I just want to say one thing about the handout. I put a little disclaimer on the top, which my handout got a little long because I have a lot of resources, and I can't cover them all tonight. To do all Jewish genealogy would take, a number of sessions. So I have some more things in the handout and the links, and I just want everyone to kind of think of keeping that as a reference kind of on your computer, and then you can just click on it rather than something that's easy to read. And God forbid we have to type in the links, but I don't want to punish you with that. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm going to share my screen here. Share. We're up there. So, okay, now can Rebecca, everyone can see, I hope, and
yep,
hear?
Looks good. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so again, what I'm going to do, and in this world, when I started on genealogy 25 years ago, oh my God, sorry, we were mailing things in, we were in microfilm world. A good day used to be for me when my wife would say, "You're waiting for the mail." Oh yeah, I'm expecting a death certificate in the mail. That was kind of like an exciting thing for us genealogists back in the day. And I've been trying to calibrate, but I think in about 3 hours I could do probably what it took me maybe 2 years to do almost back then, with all the resources we have online, and it's growing tremendously. So what I'm going to run through a little bit is a little bit of the history, kind of to set, because I know I have a varied audience of people with experience, just to kind of set when the Jews came to Chicago. And mostly it's going to be that second bullet, recordings. And let's see here, I can use my mouse here, good. And then kind of a little plug for what resources are available, especially we have Jewish Genealogical Society. And in this day and age, even though we meet in Northbrook through a hybrid meetings, most of our participants are online in various places. So it doesn't matter where you are. Every meeting we have is Zoomed. So there's nothing you can miss, and we do put them online for our members. So start with something light, and I found this cartoon or little thing. Of course, this is all pending a thorough investigation into your family history. And now I've added and DNA samples. So now I don't want to talk about DNA, but it's put a tremendous other spin, some good, some bad, again, in what we're doing in doing our genealogy. So my 2-minute history of the Jews coming to Chicago. I'll talk about wave one. The earliest Jews arrived really in the 1830s, kind of Chicago and Illinois. Illinois only became a state in 1818. So this is pretty early, and they're mostly German Jews from Bavaria, and they were peddlers and merchants, and they brought Reform Judaism, which is the most liberal type of Judaism, to Chicago when they came. This plaque here is downtown Chicago, and it says it's established in 1847. This was the 100th anniversary. And if you want to get someone's attention, start taking pictures of the federal building downtown. I took this picture and in about 1 second, someone came over to me and said, "You can't take pictures, you know." And he let me keep my, well, I think I even had a camera back in that day. But you know, that's not a place where they like you to take photos. It's a little secure. Okay, so the second wave of Jews came from what they call the Pale Settlement. And this is Eastern Europe. Up here is Lithuania and Latvia. We come down here to Belarus. Over here is Poland. And here we have Ukraine. Of course, we've heard Kiev a lot in the news lately, unfortunately, and then down there. So this is the main section where most of the Jews were forced to live by decree back in the 1800s in the Soviet Union, and Austria and Romania are down here. So this is kind of the Pale Settlement. And these areas here, like Minsk, these are what they call gubernias. They're like states, like think of them like the state of Illinois. And that's what we're going to you concentrate on when you're doing your genealogy, because the country's changed. Every war, every rezoning, there was so much turmoil in Europe that when you find out where your family's from, you say, okay, my family's from Minsk, and I don't know whether it's White Russia, Belarus, what it's called. That's where they're from. Okay, so the Eastern European Jews started coming in large numbers from that area in the 1880s, and then there was a lot of anti-Semitism in that area. And in 1881, the Tsar was assassinated, and that just kind of further exacerbated what was going on. So they mostly settled in the Maxwell Street area. I'll show you a map where this is. This is just kind of south of downtown. And they created what was shtetl, which is like a little village that they had in the old country with very small little synagogues, not big things. And they were very religious and they were very poor. And they were different from the German Jews who came earlier and were more, I would say, clean shaven and assimilated much faster into society. And this is a map of Chicago. And the Maxwell Street area was down here just south of the loop around Roosevelt Road, and Halstead, around where now the UIC campus is, the Illinois campus, and all the medical centers are down in that area. And as time went on, they moved west to an area called Lawndale, which became the largest Jewish community in the city. And now most of the Jewish people in Chicago live up here. And the North End in Rogers Park and West Rogers Park, of course, there's most of them live up in the suburbs. I don't have that, like I'm in Highland Park. They live in Highland Park, Skokie, and places on the north suburbs. Okay, so the population in the area was about 75,000 around 1900, and it grew to around 300,000 by 1940. And it's kind of stayed the same. This is kind of in the metropolitan area now because we've all moved out to Lake County, McHenry County, DuPage County, and south also. So, but it stayed around maybe 3% of the general population, and it hasn't wavered too much. Now it's a little harder sometimes to count who's Jewish and who's not, with intermarriage and other changes in how we do demographics today. So what I'm going to do is focus on doing research from anywhere, okay, and through the magic of computers and Zoom and everything, we can do it anytime, anywhere, on our phones. I don't like doing it on my phone, but whatever. And the internet is changing so fast that I do an annual talk for my society, but there's so many new things coming so fast and new companies coming on. And, occasionally there's some places where you may have to mail or talk to someone, but these are very few and far between now. I would say over 90% of the research that I do and anyone can do is basically online. So that's what I'm going to concentrate on tonight. So what my goal is And I'm not quite there. I have this little skeleton I put in. The traditional genealogy, when I started, we were working on names, dates, and places. And we were just trying to collect names of people and see how far we could go back. When were they born? When and where did they die? And have that information. And I call that skeleton. It's a good outline to start. But if we really want to understand our people and walk in their footsteps, we got to put some meat on the bones, talk about the people and their subjects. And at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I got to start with the skeleton because we got to build a structure. But it would be nice if we had a little more meat about what our ancestors did. So one of the principles that I have is that we don't know where we might find something about our people. And, I'm going to talk about that saying, so we have to start with a broad search, kind of like Ancestry does, where you just put the person's name in and without saying what you're looking for, you're not looking for the census, you're not looking for naturalization, you're just seeing what happens. And hopefully their name isn't John Smith or something where you're going to get, Harry Cohn, if a Jewish person, and get so many hits, so to speak, that you can't see it. But you never know where you're going to find something. And you might be a cemetery record, an obit. There's a lot of places, and we're just kind of fishing in the sea, so to speak, and looking where we might find something about our ancestor that we didn't know. We didn't know where they're buried. We didn't know maybe when they died. Gee, there's an obituary. Wow, if you can get an obituary for someone, there's a lot of genealogical information in it. So as far as Chicago is concerned, we're kind of lucky for the Jewish community. And Chicago is probably the second oldest, largest Jewish community in the country. There's, of course, New York, which is by far the largest and has the longest history. But Chicago was second, as I showed you in about 1930. We had 300,000, and that was far more than anywhere else other than New York. And we have one huge area out in Forest Park where we have between Waldheim and Silverman and Weiss, we have about close to 200,000 burials going back to the 1860s to the present. And then there's West Lawn Cemetery and another one, Zion Gardens in Chicago. So it's hard to totally understand this, but I say about half of all the burials, if you wanted to guess and look for your person, I would start in those four places. And that would be a good place to start. Now, if you know a little more about them, you might say, well, they were German Jews, they might be in a different cemetery. But we're lucky if you're in a place like New York, there's so many cemeteries, you don't know where to start. So that's what it is. These are the historic towns. And again, I have a lot of this information on the handout. The numbers aren't important, how many, it's just that there's a lot of old cemeteries, Zion Gardens, that go back a long way. So depending on how far you're going back and how long your family's been in the United States, these are the historic ones. And if they go back far, then you have to kind of add them to your list, either through searches or, the old method of calling and saying, gee, do you have, Bertha Frost? Is she in your cemetery? And you may have to do a few of those, but it's easy to do from home now. Okay, so here's Waldheim, which is kind of very Eastern European. It's kind of the largest cemetery we have, and it has a lot of flavors to it. It has over 300 different sections, and it started out with as a group of basically 300 different cemeteries, which were owned by various shuls, synagogues, and organizations. Each owned different parts of it, and they ran it themselves independently. And unfortunately, they had their own numbering plan and layout for how it was. So if you try and go out there, you need to get a map. But there's something to be learned about each one of those. And this is kind of, far west, past Maywood, if you go west on the Eisenhower Expressway from downtown. It's in that area where Forest Park is. And the Jews, the other part of this, a lot of these sections were owned by various organizations. Now, the Jews, when they came to Chicago, were immigrants, and we tend to stick with our people that we know. So these are like clubs of people who are from various Vinsk, Kishinev, different places, and they stuck together, and then they formed organizations, and those organizations bought plots of land, and they were buried together. So that was it. And then there were some community groups. So if you find a grave out there of somebody, you should call the cemetery and say, what section is it in? Because it may give you a hint about where they're from, what kind of group, what kind of political feelings they had. So there's always, I don't have my detective hat on, but things that we're always learning. So every time you get some data, you got to figure it out. And even if they're buried in Vince section, that doesn't mean they're really from there. Their neighbor may have said, "Oh, we got a good deal on graves. Come go with us." But it's the starting of a hint, and like any detective thing, you start there. Okay, so what I'm going to push a lot and is online records here, and I'm going to go through some of these. Something called Jewish data, and I'm going to go through. This is my genealogist society that I'm going to talk about that I was past president of. So I have a few subtle commercials for that. And then there's a few more. Some of them I'm going to talk about. Some of them are just on your handout because we don't have enough time to go through it. But there's resources out there. So this is Jewish data. It's a commercial website, and they've photographed a lot of graves, not only in Chicago, but all over, a lot in New York, and I haven't found graves in Montreal. And the big thing for us is that they've photographed over 135,000 headstone images from the Chicago Jewish cemeteries. So if you go on there, and it does have some limitations, they're not very good with sound decks and things like that, but if you play with it, you might find people 100,000 from Waldheim, Silverman, and Weiss, and you have the image of their headstone without going out there. So it's a very good thing. And the other part of it is, a little hint here, is if you become a member of our society for like $25, you get it free. We have a group membership, so it's a good deal. There's a lot of headstones, and you don't have to go out to the cemetery, and you get the information you want. So here's an example, and I hope you can read it. I kind of typed up what I put into the search here. So Rose Cooper, that's my grandmother, and I put Chicago because there could be a lot of Rose Coopers in different places as I go on Jewish data. And then when I come back from Chicago, I have about seven Rose Coopers, and I maybe know a little bit about her, or maybe I don't. So there actually were two from 1977. And this was the one that turned out to be my grandmother. And I get a full picture without leaving my house of the headstone. And these headstones, some of them have photos, some of them don't. Some of these old traditional cemeteries. And then, of course, if you can read the Hebrew or find somebody who can do it, you get their Hebrew name, Razel Bat Yitzchak. Now you find out her father's name was Yitzchak. And that's a kind of a basis of why cemeteries are so valuable to Jewish genealogy, because we get another generation back, especially on the father's side. The tradition is to put the father's name on there. Okay, so these are some other sources, and again, I'm not going through all of these, and some of them you may know about Ancestry. The library has Ancestry, and again, I have the links on there, but when you start searching for people, these are the kinds of things you do. I'm going to talk a little bit about this naturalization, which is very important piece of Jewish genealogy. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about our database at the Jewish Genealogy Society, and we have an index searchable over 100,000 records. Maybe it's 115,000 now. We try and keep it simple, and we have a mixture of cemeteries, memorial plaques. I was out today going into a synagogue that was closing, and we were taking photos of the memorial plaques, which are a little like the headstones that people put up for their deceased ancestors, and it has their death date and sometimes their father's name and some other information. So we have those, we have full text of obituaries, and I'll show you, and we have some information about various institutions. So we have a potpourri. It's a little like Ancestry. You don't know what you're going to get, whatever. And we have a lot of cemeteries, and over 46,000 from West Lawn Cemetery by them alone. And some of these we have photos of, and some of them we just have death dates, and then you have to figure it out. So this is how it works. This is kind of our research page, and you come down here and you click on the names, and then you get this thing, gives you a little information like what I just gave you, and there's a search box. Below it, it gives you kind of our catalog of what we have on there. And I'm going to show you a little bit what it is, but if I go back to my principle that I tried to do about 10 slides ago, is we don't know where we're going to find our ancestor. So if you look through our list and you say, well, they were at a different cemetery or something else, I don't want to look there, I would say, just try, because you'll never know where they might pop up. So we have a whole list of cemeteries. I don't have the whole list here. Then we have memorial plaques from various synagogues that either have closed or we've just gone proactively and photographed them. And I'm not going to talk about that. And then we have kind of other information from various sources like this. It says American Brotherhood of Mogilev. A member of ours father was a member of this Society of Mogilev, and he brought in their 30th anniversary book, and we digitized it and indexed it. So if your grandfather was a member of that, it might come up with that hit. There's a book of Chicagolands. So there's a lot of different things. And one of the best things we have, that I'm most proud of, is we have the Jewish newspaper, the JUF News. Now it's called Jewish Chicago. We have all the obituaries for over about 20 years now, maybe 30 years. Who's counting here? Full text searchable. So they send it to us every month, what they publish. So those of you know about it. So and this comes, so they have most of the people who died, Jewish people in the last 30 years, and full text searchable. So there's a lot of things in there, but again, you don't know. This is Drexel Home. It was a senior home for aged Jews. You don't know if your grandfather was in there, okay? Because we don't know everything, and that's what we're trying to discover. So you put his name in and see if he pops up somewhere. Okay, so here I'm searching, and I'm lucky to have, a fairly unique name, especially a Jewish name, Karsen. It used to be Pekarski, but my father and his brothers changed it. So I'm just looking for all the Karsens. I'm not filling in any other fields. And as you know, in searching, try not to over constrain things, because sometimes you think you know things, and they could even be right, but the record may have, like my mother's birthday, my mother's age, I may know exactly how old she was or when she was born, but she may have said something else on the document. So try not to assume you know too much when you get through this thing, and whatever. So I'm just searching Karsen, And I get a small list, about 6 people, and I know all these people, okay? These are all my family. My father changed his name. And so we have some cemetery locations at West Lawn. And here's like my father's obituary, and it's a full text. And here it mentions me and my late wife and all of the family members, okay? And this is actually searchable with a different technique, which you can try and figure out if you're looking for people, or of course, genealogy. This is giving us a lot of information on who his children are and grandchildren and things like that. So that's especially valuable, and you get a potpourri of results. Here I picked Rose Cohen. Actually, she's not my relative, but I'll show you what happens with someone like Rose Cohen. Here we have a few bullets here, or things to choose from. I'm choosing exactly Cohen. You might do sound like and other things. And for the given name, I always use contains, because sometimes, especially the women, then she might be Rose Karsen Cohen, and she put her given name as Rose Karsen, and then Cohen is her last name. So if I put exactly Rose, then I wouldn't get a match. So again, I'm trying not to over constrain my search. So when I search her, I get, and this is kind of showing you what's possible. These are different Rose Cohens. They're not all the same person. That's why you think, she's all over the place. But you can see here we have one from Oakwood Cemetery, here a plaque, here's another one. And when you have these hot links over here, which you probably all understand, those are clickable, and sometimes you might actually get the memorial plaque or not. So whatever other information we have, you get there. And I'm going to use this as an example here. This is this Drexel Senior Home. We had 709 biographies. And if I click on that, I'm not doing this live, this is the kind of record I get. So we went and when people went into this home, they did a little interview with them on entering, and they wrote down various information. You can see it's handwritten. We went down and found the book, was able to get the book at Spertus Library and photographed it. And then we indexed the names. And then here's the information that's more readable. Of course, you get it like this. And here's it says she's a widow and various information. So sometimes in this kind of thing, you might get information that you can't get in standard records. I have no children, and I was supported by Old Age Assistance Act. Okay, so she's giving you some flavor of things that you're not going to find probably on Ancestry or in a standard record. So that's why the more meat we can find, and some references, who her friends were, and where she's buried. So someday you could find other things. So we're looking again for unique things about people that we don't have through standard records. Here's Find a Grave. At this point, it said 120 million, 1 million. I'm sure that number is higher now. This is a system where people just go out and voluntarily photograph graves all over the place and upload them. And it's a phenomenal thing. You never know what you're going to find on there. And this is just my sample of looking through it, of all the Jewish cemeteries in Chicago that have people on Find a Grave. And this is kind of, I did some work. I try to estimate it. It really doesn't matter how many there are. It only matters if you find your grandfather. So put his name in and see what happens. And you may say, I don't know where Ridge Lawn is, but he could be there. So this is free. They don't charge for it. So, give it a shot. Here's Find a Grave. Here's how it works. I put my father in here. I knew I wasn't going to, well, I didn't know someone may have gone out to West Lawn and actually photographed him. I don't know that. So I put Chicago and I put Paul Karsen, and I got no matches. Okay, so I said, oh, well, I've over constrained this, or maybe I'll go take a try. So I just then only did Karsen. I took out, so no given name, and I found my aunt and uncle at Zion Gardens. So depending on how your name is, again, Karsen is kind of a unique name. So in some ways, I'm very lucky. But you know, you have to play with these things and see how they work. But you can click and get a better image here of the grave. I'm not showing you the full thing, but again, you can find out where the people are and go out and see them and see who else is, who their neighbors are, and see who's buried with them. Okay, now I'm going to talk about naturalization. It's kind of what I call the pivotal point of Jewish genealogy, because it's kind of the point between, I'll say, the old country and the new country. And we were lucky in Chicago. We had a project back during the Depression by the WPA, and they created a whole slew of maybe every person who was naturalized in the Chicago area, including some parts of Wisconsin and even I think into Indiana. So again, I put Hyman Cooper in here, and it has this little index card, gives his address and date of entry, which is a very important key to figuring out what it is, and the court. The court is also important because some court records are online and some aren't. So, but again, we're lucky in Chicago. There's a lot of these out there, and these cards are found. I'll talk more about it on Ancestry and on all the major sites, Family Search. The other thing we have is in the Circuit Court of Cook County, which a lot of the naturalizations were done. Basically, actually, you could be naturalized in almost a divorce court, on any court back in the day. But they have over 400,000 of these petitions indexed online. I'm going to show you how that works. So here's again my Hyman Cooper, and I get a record for Hyman Cooperstein. So that could be the same person, maybe. He may have changed his name in that process. I think he did. He was Cooperstein at one time. I'm not sure if this is a different person that was on the index card. The information doesn't match, but I'm just showing you what you can find, and then you have to kind of dig deeper and look at the census and say, did my Hyman Cooper live at 1265 South St. Louis, whatever, in 1919 or 1920? But this is a tremendous resource. Here I found my grandmother's naturalization. The interesting thing about doing these talks for me is I look for examples, and then all of a sudden I find things about my family that I didn't find because I did my research a long time ago. I won't say I think I was done, but I didn't go back and start over again. So those of you who have done research 10, 15 years ago, I would say, well, start over. Like you don't know anything, go online, and here all of a sudden I found my grandmother's naturalization, which I never knew. This was before she married. She remarried Hyman Cooper. Actually, that was her second husband. But you can see she had Pekarsky there in 1916. So the other thing you can do with this is you can just search a town and maybe just have one parameter in there. This is, it's Botoșani, it says, but it's pronounced Botoșan. It's in Romania. Now, Romania can be spelled back in the day R-O-U or just R-O-U-M or R-O-M. So if you put a country in there and you over-constrain it, you may not get any, even though there are people there. So I always start with less, and then I can always fill in. So how many people am I going to get? Maybe I can find some other cousins or some other people that, I just couldn't find. And here I got quite a few results. It's on 2 pages, 1 and 2. And these people here, Harry Marcus and Max Markovitz, actually, the Markovitzes changed their name to Marcus. at some point. This is Max's son, Harry. I don't know which Harry is his son, but they're both from, from this town. So if you know the town they're from and you don't over constrain it, so you can see how they spelled Romania. They spelled R-U-M, R-O-U-M, R-O-M. So if I put a country in there, I would have missed some of these people. And it gives you more information, their birth date, and again, you saw what they are. Now, both Ancestry says they have a lot of naturalization indices in their, I'll say, their card catalog. I looked for Pekarskis. I didn't find any hint, but this is the kind of things I have, these links, and sometimes you have to fish around. So then I go over to immigration and travel on Ancestry. I put in Paul Karsen. I didn't gain for Karsen, but voila, I got my father here. So this is not an exact science. The records, the spellings, you could see Jitomer's spelled different ways, whatever. My father put his arrival date as July of 1914. He wasn't exactly right. It was really August 3rd, but he was, 5 years old when he came. So what did he know? Or maybe he forgot. Sometimes the records are wrong. So you just don't assume just because you know something that it's exactly right. And when you do in a search engine, you say, I know he arrived in August, and you put August in there, he won't come up. And then actually I found his whole record there with, where he was living and other information about him. So, how tall he was. And sometimes actually the naturalization is a place where people legally change their names. Otherwise, sometimes they just changed it. They came in and they didn't change it at Ellis Island. Believe me, they did not change it at Ellis Island, but they may have gotten the job and they didn't want to be Pekarski anymore. It sounded too foreign. They just found Karsen as a nice, simple name. And sometimes they think I'm Swedish or Danish or Norwegian because of it's like Larson with SEN. Again, Family Search says they have a lot of naturalization records. So you just have to kind of look around. I looked for Pekarskis there. I didn't find any, but I've given you the links in the handout, the live links, and I'm just going to skip through here. So again, what I'm saying is naturalization is kind of the key to linking our ancestor between the old country, when they came in, where they're from, and the US, where they were living, and what name they had when they were here. And it's a key to finding arrival records because most of the time they give fairly good, accurate accounts of where they arrived and when they arrived. Because Ellis Island alone, I think we have over 20 million, arrivals. So looking through that is a challenge. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit now about more meat on the bones. Is Sentinel, which was a Jewish publication, weekly, published for about 80 years. And I have 2 links again in your handout, 2 versions. And this is how it looks when you bring it up. I put in Paul Karsen. I put him in quotes because I don't want to just get all the Pauls that have been every issue for 80 years. I don't want to do that. So I'm trying to make it exact. And I got two hits for him, which isn't too much. But, I got his wedding announcement. I kind of knew when they were married, but it's nice kind of, some of us genealogists are sentimental, and it's nice to kind of see the actual publication, and they put it in there. And then this is, I didn't know about, that it said that he was treasurer of the AID club. But this does a complete text search of 80 years of publications, has a lot on organizations, and it was kind of a little bit, not quite the gossip column, but this is now down into more meat. Some of it's a little trivia, might not be that important, but you're getting beyond what you get like in Ancestry. I'm going to talk, the last thing is a new database we have in our society. And it's what we call a subject database. And what we've taken a lot of sources and forced them into one search where you can search on a subject title. And again, these are documents, this is newsletters from our organization, newsletters from the Chicago Jewish Historical Society, videos, cemetery sections, and libraries, and tried to put all that into as much we could one search engine. So it's a little complicated. I wish it was simpler. We haven't figured that out yet, but it has a lot of information. And the other kind of breakthrough that I had in doing this is that there's a lot of books and publications that are online today, and full text, searchable, online, free. So, you know, we have a library in Lake Zurich, and you can't have all the Jewish publications because, you know, you don't have them all. But a lot of them now, all these are some of the most important Jewish publications are all can be found online, free, fully text searchable from your home. And what we do is kind of have, again, a search. Everything is contains. My father lived in Lawndale. So now I'm trying to find out a little bit about the neighborhood. I'm trying to put some meat on the bones. Okay, I know when he was born. I know when he got married. I know when he died. I have his cemetery. I'm trying to find out what was his life like. So I click on Lawndale and I find a number of different references. I'm going to show you here something, and I'm sorry I'm going fast, but so there's an article in the Chicago Jewish Historical Society Journal back in 2019. We have all of theirs linkable to us on pages 12 and 13, going out to eat along Roosevelt Road. And I click on that, I get the whole publication. This is the front page. And then if I go down to page 12, I get eating out, and it talks about what the restaurants were like, how many Jewish restaurants there were. There's some photos of them. I don't have that all here. But again, if you're trying to kind of understand what life was like back in 1910, 1920, when my father lived there, okay, talks about 1916, what was going on in 1920. The kosher sausage places, the ice cream shop, just to give you some feeling of what life was like, because genealogy is, it's not just dates, it's what was their life like. Here I have another thing on the type, and we have 5 FAQs, frequently asked questions, and in there we have information on this renumbering of the streets in Chicago. If you didn't know that, in 1909 they renumbered all the streets. It's very nice that I have my mother's birth certificate from 1907 that says she was born at 521 North Halsted. But 521 Halsted changed between the time she was born in 1907 and now. So you have to kind of find a resource, either a Newberry library or somewhere, which can tell you how to translate it. But I picked number 4. Of course, it's one that I did. It's a welcome video that I put together, and guess what? It looks a little like me here. And I have a 10-minute or 15-minute explanation of the website. So to try and give you a little more flavor and try and understand how these things work, because sometimes they're complicated. Okay, so my father said he was bar mitzvahed at the Krozer Shul. So what I do is I don't over constrain it. I just say maybe KROZ is enough. I don't worry about capitals. It doesn't matter. It searches that, doesn't have to be exact. And down here for subjects, I'm looking for shuls. They have crows somewhere in their title. And I click on that, and then I get these hits. I get various resources that talk about Newberry Library has a whole database about all these shuls and where they are, and a lot of information. So I'm kind of seeing, this is kind of like you going into a Jewish library, like Spertus Library, and asking the librarian, well, I'm looking for information about the Crozer Shoal, and she may say, well, look here, look in this book, A Walk to Shoal, look here, look, you know, there's a section out at the cemetery. Maybe that's it. There's Crozer #1 sections at Waldheim Cemetery. Maybe they're buried there. So it's kind of a potpourri of things. If I click on this, I get the Newberry Library website, which we can link to inside, and they have a map. And this shows you exactly where that show was. It shows you what year it was. I cut that off so it would be more readable, but shows you exactly where it was. And this is kind of a map of the buildings in that area. And then 2 years later, it could be in another place. So again, it kind of shows you, well, gee, where'd they live? Where did he go to show? Is that walking distance? Yes. Okay. Coming back to it, now I'll show you the real power of this. A hit #1 is a book called Bridges to American City. It's by a fellow by the name of Sid Sorkin, who wrote about all of the organizations, the Landsmannschaft in Chicago. You click on that, it takes you to Internet Archive. The whole book is there. You know, it's like you went to the library and picked it up, but now it's available. You have to, you know, sign it out like you're signing it out from the Lake Zurich Library, because this book is still under copyright, so it's not free. But you can take it out for 2 weeks, an hour, whatever. You need to sign it out. Then you click on the search page, you type in crows again, and you find wherever in that whole book they mention crows. So right here is something more about the shul. It was organized in 1899, blah, blah, blah. Maybe this is your ancestor, and you can kind of copy and paste it right into your PowerPoint or into your family history, or do something with it. So it's tremendously powerful. And when you search the whole book, you really get more than the index, because the index, they're limited how much they could index, and they didn't have the technology back when they published these books. Okay, we're almost to the end here. So, and the last one is, if we're looking for information about a specific town, I put sounds like Zhytomyr, that's where my father's from. I'm looking for information really about organizations in Chicago that had something to do with Zhytomyr. And these are the hits I have. I think 11. 4 of them are out of this Sorkin book. 4 of them are locations of the shul at various times. The shul's moved a lot because the population moved and a lot of changes. And all that's about there. There's cemetery sections. Okay, maybe they're buried at Waldheim Cemetery in the Zhytomyr section, if they're from there. So that would be some clue. Okay, I'll call the cemetery, see if they're there, because I didn't have any idea where they were buried. So if you find their naturalization, then all of a sudden, and maybe they belong to these shuls. There's a wealth of knowledge out there once you kind of get on a detective trail. So the summary is kind of, you know, we have a lot of history, but you use the tools I have in the handout as kind of a link to keep it. I keep it up on my website, and when I want to go anywhere, I just pull it up and use those hot links. We have these good databases, and I'm a little biased here, and our organization is, you know, open. We have meetings, we allow non-members to come. So if you just want to come to a meeting, though, we would like you to join to support us and get more help, because that we have help desks and other resources to help people who are just starting. So I think I'm at the end. I think I'm almost under my limit, maybe 3 minutes over. And I'm ready to take questions. Rebecca, if you have some, maybe I'll stop sharing. Does that be a good idea, Rebecca?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So
All right.
I'll take a drink and
Okay, well, thank you so much, Mike. That was really fantastic. For anyone that has questions, please put them in the chat in the Q&A, and I will read those out to Mike. And while people are maybe coming up with some questions, I just have to say I love the metaphor that you used, that, you know, the traditional genealogy is the skeleton, and then you've got to put meat on the bones. I think it's so important to add context, you know, to talk about what their life was like, to explore their neighborhood, you know, kind of what foods they would have eaten, like you said, the restaurants. It brings, I think, those people to life much more than a bunch of names and dates ever can.
Okay, so I have a thing. I couldn't find the right image with meat on the bone. They were all a little weird. So if anyone has an idea and they want to send me an image of how I could use that in my conclusion, they're just a little too gross. Like the skeleton was fine, but the meat ones were so there's a challenge out there to, if there's any overachievers out there, say, oh, let me, you know, do a Google image search or something and see what I can find. So, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. Okay. Let's see. We have a question from Mona Lisa. It's not about Jewish genealogy. It is about looking for death records of someone who is cremated. I do not know the exact spelling of their last name. So how to find a record for someone who is cremated when you don't have the precise last name?
Well, you just have to, you know, use Ancestry, and it does the kind of the sounds like searches. They all had death certificates, even if they're cremated. They just you know, they don't have a burial site, so they should be in the death index. And if they're in Illinois, you know, there's a death index from the state of Illinois that's in my handout, and Family Search has a lot of death things. If you don't know the spelling, it's difficult. I must admit, but sometimes you can get lucky or find somebody else in the family, you know, that you know something about, and kind of go about it in another way. So
yeah, you always look for those close relations, right? And then see if you can find that person that way. So another attendee asks, how does someone who is just starting out avoid being completely overwhelmed? I think that's a great question.
Well, go slowly. I think the first thing is to try and pick one branch. So pick your mother or somebody that you think, you know, where you have cousins who might know something. So where you have the kind of the largest collection of people that you could call, say your cousins that you know, first cousins, second cousins, and stick with one branch. Don't try and do, because by the time you get to your grandparents, you got four, and it doubles every time. So I would stick with one branch and say, I'm going to go to my mother, I'm going to go to her mother, and try and go one leg at a time, and definitely have some program, database program. I use Family Tree Maker to put your information in, because if you have I know someone has a million kind of scraps of paper, and oh my God, you know, somewhere where you can kind of put the information and then you can print it out in an organized way. So go slowly and stick to one sub family. Otherwise, you know, quickly, if you're successful, you'll be overwhelmed. So
I think that's a great piece of advice. And also, I don't know about you, but I'm all about documenting where I've looked so far, because it's so easy to just jump on half a dozen websites and put in names and find a bunch of stuff and download it. So it's nice to really kind of write down where you've searched, what you've searched.
Have kind of a research log or book or something.
Yes.
To kind of see what you've done. You know, sometimes we all want to go fast, and I get traps of time. Oh, I can find this. So have a little patience and discipline, and that's good.
Yeah, it gets exciting when you type your, you know, ancestor's name into a database for the first time, and like some of the pages you were showing, oh, it has so many results, and you know, it's easy to get kind of distracted. Well, I have a question.
Okay.
So you talked about online resources, which are absolutely fantastic. And I do think, even if you're in the Chicagoland area, it's great to be able to start from home and research at your leisure. But do you have any recommendations for in-person locations, or like the county courthouse or whatever? Where are your top places in Chicago to physically go and search for Jewish history and genealogy?
Well, a cemetery, I used to go to Newberry Library back in the day, but now a lot of things they had, like the census that weren't available, are online. I would try and, find somebody go out to the cemetery, and look around and say, well, who is this person? And if you know a little Hebrew or whatever, take some pictures and say, well, who are all these people? Because the Jews kind of they stuck together. So sometimes the family is a lot, and you can find, grandma's sister is in the same plot. So that's, we're going on Mother's Day. I'm going with a friend, one of my genealogy friends, out to Waldheim Cemetery to see all of our mothers and grandmothers. But I think, maybe not alone, sometimes a little challenging, but that's kind of, seeing what it's like. And so that would be kind of my favorite in-person place, even though now a lot of these great things are online, but you can't always tell who's next to whom from the sites, so you don't get that insight.
That's a really good point, to look around where your family members buried. So Janice asks, does the Office of the Medical Examiner have reports from 1930, or have they been expunged?
I don't know. I think in my handout somewhere, there's some medical examiner things. I don't want to look exactly, but I think some of those have coroner reports. Yeah, I have Chicago Police Department homicide records up to 1930. I have a link in my handout, and coroner inquest things. So if there's something unusual about the death and homicide, so look, it's on page 2 in that section of my handout here, and there may be more. Whatever, a good place to call for some of that stuff is there's a Illinois Research Depository at Northeastern University, and they have a lot of this kind of stuff there, these kind of Chicago homicides and weird stuff with it. But the other thing is, well, newspapers, searching newspapers. I didn't really talk too much about that, but that's a whole phenomenal topic of finding things, especially weird things if they were in some crime or accident, fire, something bad. But that's life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly newspapers are one of my favorite places to search, because like you said with the
You have newspapers.com in your library?
yes, we do. Yes.
Yeah. Can people do that from home, or do they have to come in?
If so, ELA patrons can use most of our databases from home. Anyone from the public can come into the library and use it for free.
Okay, so like newspapers.com, I don't know how many newspapers they have, so you might find something. And the obituaries are really my favorite thing in those kind of documents. And hopefully you have not Mary Smith for all your relatives. You try you have something a little unique, but you never know where they're going to pop up.
Yeah.
And where they were living.
Yeah, certainly. Well, like you said in this, I think you were talking about the Sentinel, some of them newspapers at some point had like essentially local news, local gossip. So-and-so bought this place, this relative visited this person, and get to know a lot
Especially
about the community.
small towns. I have a uncle who was, he was had the general store in a small town near outside of Urbana, Illinois. And, he went to Champaign to visit his cousins. So some little thing like him and his wife, that would never be in a Chicago Tribune, but it maybe gives you some flavor of what the life was like. So newspapers are very good.
Yeah, sure. Mona and Lisa has a question, I guess more for me, asking whether ELA has a subscription to Ancestry Library Edition. And we do. So that's another database that anyone is welcome to come to the library and use. And unfortunately, Ancestry, during the pandemic, they opened it up and let people use it from home. It's now back to just in library use for us. So patrons have to use it in the library as well. But we have newspapers.com, we have the Chicago Tribune historical database, Ancestry, we're an affiliate library for Family Search. I think we have Heritage Quest, we have a few others, and I think every single database except for Ancestry you can use from home. And then Family Search, of course, if you come in the library, you get that affiliate level of records. But yes, any member of the public is welcome to come in and use our computers, use those databases. I would encourage you to do so. And you have to establish an account to use those. So for Ancestry, if you're talking about a library account, you don't have to if you come in person, that you can just use whether you're an ELA patron or a random person off the street. Family Search, Fold 3 is another one. Some of these you do have to create free accounts to use them, but Ancestry Library Edition, for example, it's kind of a general subscription, so you don't have to use an account. And Mike, do you have any insights into if there's a particular genealogy database that is kind of the best collection of Jewish records? Like, does Family Search have more than Ancestry, or it's kind of, all mixed up, everyone has some stuff?
Well, there's a jewishgen.org, which is a big Jewish database. They have quite a few records. They have a lot of records like from Eastern Europe and whatever. What they have is a lot of tutorials and information. So if you're new and you want to learn about naturalization process and a lot of things, it's a wealth of that kind of knowledge. So it's basically free. They do ask you to register, create an account. It's jewishgen.org. I hope it's in my handout. If you want the advanced searching, then they ask for a little donation, but you don't need that to start. And they have a lot of cemetery records and whatever, but they have, good tools. Like if you have a town they're from and you don't know how to spell Cobno or something like that, they have tools to kind of help you figure out, because sometimes people write strange names in their naturalization and you can't find them on the map, but they'll help you figure out what town it was and give some of the information about how many Jews live there. So it's more like a teaching tool more than a lot of records. So that's kind of what I would recommend is jewishgen.org.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for Mike? This has been really fantastic. I've learned a lot about where I should direct people to search. And just as a reminder to everyone, this presentation is being recorded. I'll send that link out in the next couple of days. You have the handout in your email already, but I'll resend that tonight at the end of this presentation. And Mike shared his email address earlier. So Mike, if people have questions, general questions, is that okay to reach out to you?
Yep. Email me. You can email me all night. 3 a.m. I'm not putting my phone number in there, but emails, I really like emails because then I feel someone paid attention to what I was doing. And so, yeah, please send them. I get emails every day like, okay, I'm looking for this person. Can you help me? So that's what I like. That's what I do. So please keep those cards and emails coming in.
All right. Well, thank you so much for so generously sharing your knowledge and time today, Mike. Thank you everyone who has attended the event tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're able to come back to a future ELA Library event, and everyone have a lovely evening.